We have two teams coming in with their backs against the wall, both sitting at 1-2 this weekend as the Kansas Jayhawks travel to Morgantown to take on the West Virginia Mountaineers in game one of Big 12 play for both teams. And in this episode of Couz's Corner, which is brought to you in part by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino and Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, we're going to talk about this game, and we're going to do it with a guest, Mr. Braiden Turner, and we're going to do it right after this word from one of those sponsors. Since 1931, the attorneys at Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up? Welcome into another edition of Couz's Corner. Make yourself comfortable, belly yourself up to the bar, and let me pour you out a double shot this time, of top shelf college football content, joined by Mr. Braiden Turner. Braiden, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. I'm excited to be back on here. We talked before. We did this a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed it and was comfortable. And I've enjoyed following you on Twitter since then, just getting Big 12 news and West Virginia news. So love keeping up with the conference, and I'm really appreciative for you having me back on.
Same, man. Appreciate you. Let's just dive right in, man. Well, first off, before we do that, go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you if they want to interact and if they want to, check out your work.
Yeah. So if you're watching on YouTube, you have my Twitter handle up top. It's bturner23. And then me and a couple of my buddies, we started a KU athletics podcast about 5 years ago. It's called Ain't No Seats. It's Ain't No Seats Pod on Twitter. So yeah, if you guys followed me, I'm sure it's a lot of West Virginia fans, but keeping up with the Big 12 or whatever, we usually keep it pretty friendly. So I'd appreciate anyone that follows, and thank you for letting me shout out or letting me plug myself a little bit.
Absolutely, man. Wouldn't do it any other way. This game is, it's set to be a very, very good game in my opinion. I mean, as you can see by the BetUS line at the bottom there, West Virginia's favored by 2 right now. And considering it's a home game, that tells me that it's a pretty even matchup right there. We have two teams, as I mentioned in the opener, that are struggling. Kansas struggling on the offensive side, West Virginia on the defensive side. But just tell us a little bit, Braiden, about what's going on with the Jayhawks and that offense right now.
Yeah, so the rushing attack has obviously been great. I think the offensive line has, surprised people, been better than people expected. They lost a couple guys from the offensive line last year. They lost Dom Pooney, who's starting for the 49ers. They lost their center, Mike Nowitzki. They lost Armaj Reed-Adams, but they replaced them with a former 5-star recruit, Logan Brown. And then they got Bryce Foster, center from Texas A&M, who's a big boy. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the run game's been great. Right. It's been weird. It hasn't been very fluid. The play calling and the schemes, it hasn't been very exciting, especially through the air. And there's been a lot of talk about Jeff Grimes, the new offensive coordinator. There's been a lot of talk on Jalon Daniels, who I know you're familiar with.
Absolutely.
He's been a great player. He's been a great player in the past. And these first 3 games, the decision-making has been, just out of the ordinary for him, I guess. He's thrown a lot of weird picks and a lot of crucial picks against Illinois. They're pretty much going into halftime with the lead. There was a pick 6 on the final play of the drive or final play of the half. UNLV last week, they had the ball in UNLV territory with a couple score lead. And they had the ball coming out of half. He threw a ball into quadruple coverage. UNLV takes it all the way to the other 30-yard line. And then UNLV loses track of time. They don't call a timeout. So the clock is expiring. They throw a bomb into the end zone. And our corner, Kobe Bryant, took a bad angle, and they ended up scoring as time expired. So UNLV was almost giving KU a gift. And yeah, JD he's making a lot of uncharacterized throws. He just doesn't seem very comfortable. There's people around the program that claim that Jeff Grimes is kind of making the reads for him and kind of telling him who to throw the ball to before
Really?
the play.
Huh.
So it sounds like they're making a change this week. Jeff Grimes, the OC, has been on the sideline,
Uh-huh.
and Coach Jim Zabrowski, he called the plays in KU's bowl game where KU's offense just went crazy.
Uh-huh.
So supposedly Jeff Grimes will be up in the booth, and now Zabrowski, who's the quarterback coach, is with JD every day, will be down on the sideline. So
Right.
we'll see if they make a change. But like I said, the last 2 weeks, the games have been tight late, and KU made mistakes. And they were better. They're better than both teams on paper. Like, I'll say
Yeah.
that right now. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, 2 weeks in a row where they just blew it. So if they're in another tight game, which, like you said, Vegas kind of has it predicted going that way, I don't know how much I trust KU, especially on the road in a tough environment.
Well, I mean, like I talked about how these two teams were in similar situations. I mean, West Virginia's 1-2. They lost that Pitt game last week close. The difference being obviously it's our big heated rival. So it really, really was a tough one to swallow. We were up 10 with 4 minutes to go and lose the game. But our problem has been West Virginia's problem has been on defense more so than offense. This West
Kind of the
Virginia second,
secondary, right?
yes, it is.
That's
They have been a sieve, man.
that's
They're
kind of
giving up.
what has
Mhm.
me worried about this matchup is KU. Like I said, they have not been good through the air. JD, I mean, even the Illinois game, he averaged about 3 yards of completion, and he's
Yeah,
thrown 5, 6 picks. So I think the way to get West Virginia is through the air, and we're not doing that effectively.
right.
And what we do best is run it. And I think West Virginia could slow that down a little bit. So that is definitely what has me worried about this matchup.
Yeah, the West Virginia run defense has been really great, really good so far. I mean, they held that really good back from Pitt, Reed. They held him. I think he had 60 some yards, maybe, or maybe have been less than that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I mean, they held him in check. But unfortunately, we let Eli Holstein junk it for 301 yards, including a 40-yard bomb on 2nd and 30 late in the game. So just with three guys around, we had three DBs around one receiver, and he came down with the ball. I mean, it's just stuff like that's been happening for 3 weeks, man. And of course, Penn State loss, not that unexpected, but what was unexpected is the team came out flat. They came out, they looked unprepared. They were making uncharacteristic mistakes. They weren't even competitive in the game, man. And it was just
And
really, really
that,
heartbreaking because we thought the team had taken a step, you know. And
especially, I remember, I mean, I pay attention to betting so much and line
mhm,
movement. And that was, I think it was over 10. And then it just kept creeping
yeah,
towards West Virginia. I think it got close to a touchdown. So
yep,
I try to watch as much Big 12 football as possible. And I remember tuning into that game thinking it was be a good game. And
mhm,
obviously the weather delay might have played a little part into that. But yeah, Penn State grabbing Kodal Nicky from us just
yes, it
hurts
did
the
hurt.
heart.
It did, man. I expected I expected Kansas to take a little bit of a step back because of the Kotelnicki loss, but I did not expect them to lose to Illinois and UNLV.
No,
Um,
and they were obviously favored in both games, and
mhm.
they were up. Um, God, they were up in the second half in both, and so yeah, I think as fans, KU fans, I think we were kind of oblivious, and we just kind of undersold losing Kotelnicki. And Jeff Grimes, he was with Zach Wilson at BYU and Baylor when they won the Big 12 title, or they were in the Big 12 title, I forget. But the
They
thing that,
were in it, or they
yeah,
but he also got fired at
yeah,
Baylor.
that's why
So
I had my worries. But the thing that kept me excited is just KU in the bowl game. Kotelnicki was gone. He wasn't calling plays. And then everyone, that's what really has KU fans stressed out about this start is KU had pretty much has everyone back on offense. Both running backs, Highshaw and Neal,
mhm.
all four, their top four receivers and all are seniors. Lawrence Arnold, Luke Grimm, Quentin Skinner, Trevor Wilson, they're all
Wow,
seniors. And so they'll lose their top four receivers, their top two backs, and then Jalon Daniels will probably be gone after this year. So you had everyone back, and now you lose 30 seniors after this year. So
wow,
this game on Saturday just feels like this makes or breaks the year. Like if
That's
they lose, they
mhm.
could just crumble and be done.
Yep.
If they win, maybe they make some noise for Big 12 title and at least make a bowl game. But if either team loses, they might be in danger of missing a bowl game.
Absolutely. West Virginia fans feel the same way because, we're already reeling. The fans are wanting coaching changes. The defensive coordinator's on the hot seat, probably. Coach Brown could be, if they lose this one. So it's just, it's not a very positive vibe around the West Virginia program right now. We had really, really high expectations coming into the season because of everything the coaching staff was telling us, and it's just not panned out. But looking at the Kansas schedule here, I mean, it's not an easy one, man. They have to go. They're playing TCU after West Virginia, then they have to go on the road to play Arizona State. Then they get a bye. Then they're at home against Houston. That should be a win, but who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, Willie Fritz is a really good football coach, and they're playing really good defense. So.
They've looked great defensively. I think OU was like 16 to 12.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then even the UNLV game, they kind of slowed them down a little bit. But yeah, that was the only thing with KU's schedule and why we were very hyped before the season was you avoid pretty much all the top teams in the Big 12 besides K-State, who you're going to play no matter what. But we avoided Arizona, Utah, Oklahoma State, UCF, and just in the odds list, we only played 2 of the top 8 teams on the odds list to win the Big 12 title. So we were excited about that. But then, yeah, like you said, Arizona State looks like a team that is surprising. TCU, I feel they always have athletes, and Hoover's a pretty good quarterback. Sonny Dykes has won plenty before. So, yeah, the schedule is not as easy as we thought. And I feel like that's just a Big 12 thing. The Big 12 is always pretty damn solid top to bottom.
Yeah, West Virginia plays 5 of the top 6 ranked preseason teams, and they play them all in a row.
Oh, my God.
Including Kansas. You got Kansas, then we get a bye, then we have to go to Oklahoma State. Then they come home for 2 weeks. I keep saying us, but I'm a fan, so I say we. But then we come home to play Kansas State and Iowa State, Kansas State back-to-back games. Then they have to travel to Arizona to close it off. So that's a brutal schedule. So that's why I'm saying if West Virginia can't beat Kansas, I don't see but 3 or 4 more wins on the schedule potentially. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, and that's why I'm worried about bowling. And KU's never went bowling 3 years in a row in school history, so that kind of would have been.
That would have been yeah.
And our AD and our play-by-play announcer before the season, they both said that this is the most anticipated season in KU football history because it's the second time in school history they went bowling back-to-back years. They were preseason ranked. They had all these guys that had expectations and hype. Kobe Bryant, Devin Neal, Jalon Daniels, a lot of guys. And so, yeah, if they lose this weekend, I feel like maybe they'll lose the locker room or because their only goal this year was Big 12 title. So that's kind of why I'm staying, I guess, excited and still have my hopes up is because all they've talked about is winning a Big 12 title, and losing non-con games sucks because it can affect bowling, but also it doesn't affect making the Big 12 title game or not.
Correct.
And that's it feels open. Like Oklahoma's gone. Texas is gone. I think every team has their flaws, maybe besides Utah, but then you look at Rising's injury history. He's hurt right now. Oklahoma State's defense, I don't know if they're all the way there. K-State, they're really well coached and their rushing attack is really good. But can Avery Johnson make throws and will he have growing pains? So I think the Big 12's still wide open, but God, both of these teams have to be insanely desperate Saturday. Like you said, It's a Big 12 opener. And if you lose that game, you probably have to win out to make any noise to make the Big 12 title game. And it just feels like your season could be down the drain if you lose on Saturday.
It almost feels like a must-win game. At least for West Virginia, it does anyway. I'm not sure about you guys, but
yeah, I mean, you're 1-3, so you would have to, how many games of 8? You'd have to go 5-3 the rest of the way to even make a bowl. And then it's like, Yeah, bowling's cool. I'm not going to discredit it because I've been through a lot as a KU fan the last 15 years.
Right,
But
right.
when you have expectations, stuff like that, that's not really
Yeah.
what you're excited about. But I think the one thing I wanted to ask you was
Mhm,
just the vibe around the program
mhm.
after losing to a big rival like that. Like, do you feel like the fans and the team is deflated, or do you think it's a situation where they could rise up and come play pissed off?
Well, the fans are deflated. I know that for a fact. Even there were still some fans that were still on Neal Brown's bandwagon. They still were, quote, trusting the climb, which was his mantra when he got here. Uh, they still had faith in him. And after that game on Saturday against Pitt, almost everybody, I say, majority of the fan base has now turned against him. Even people who were, you know, really supporting him through thick and thin since he's been here. A lot of them have even turned and said, "Hey, man, we've got to have a change," because what's disheartening, Braiden, is it's the same mistakes and stuff that the team's been dealing with for the past 4 to 5 years. Like, they make mistakes at crucial times, penalties at crucial times, just boneheaded mistakes on special teams. Just, the play calling is suspect in big moments. Just all kinds of, perfect example. We have a 230-pound running back named CJ Donaldson, who you probably
Yeah,
are familiar with.
I watched a bunch of him on Saturday. I thought he was just gonna just carry him, and I thought the game was over.
Yeah, he was playing well. Well, they in the on that next, I think it was the next to last drive or the last drive when when West Virginia's trying to hold a lead. Pitt had all the momentum. They're coming back. Our defense, was struggling, or secondary was anyway. They try to run a stretch zone run outside the tackle box, man, with CJ.
And
And
he's kind of inside the
yeah,
tackles.
he's not a speed guy. He's a downhill. He gets the ball and he runs. That's what he does. He's got just enough wiggle to get past guys at the first and second level, but he's not going to outrun anybody. And they ran that play 3 times in that game, and it never worked. And so for them to run it in that situation was just mind-boggling to me. But that was just one example. Just like I said, major penalties, just collapses on defense at the worst possible time. They held Pitt to 5 yards in the second half until the last 2 drives of the game in the last 4 minutes.
Because they were up 2 scores, right?
Correct.
West Virginia.
Yeah. We were all over Eli Olsen. They sacked him 5 or 6 times, I think. They were all in his grill, man. Our defensive front played really well. Really well. And they shut the run game down, but our secondary could not cover anybody. And unfortunately, all he had to do was sit back and chunk it, and it worked.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how KU's passing game looks and how our receivers look. I know we have a senior in Quentin Skinner who can really stretch the field, but he has not looked very locked in this year. I don't know how much you've watched of KU, but the Illinois game, the offense kind of put 2 drives together, and then they ran a reverse where they faked the handoff to Neal because Neal got going, handed it off to Skinner, and if they showed a replay or you looked at like an all 22 film or something, he had so much daylight, and he just fumbles the handoff, and they get the ball. He fumbled in the opener against Lindenwood. I don't even know how many catches he has this year. It has to be less than 5, but it just looks lethargic through the air. Like, to not score more than 20 points against Illinois or UNLV is just insane. And Devin Neal only had 14 carries against Illinois, where Jalon Daniels was averaging 3 yards per completion, and they couldn't get anything going through the air. So the play calling's just been really weird. Like, Kotelnicki was really good at just sticking with what was working. We beat UCF. KU beat UCF last year, who I thought they were a pretty solid team. Malzahn coached. John Rice Plumlee was the starter. He had experience at the D1 level. I think he was at Ole Miss. KU beat UCF 51-22 with Jason Bean throwing the ball 9 times. The only quarterback that played, he threw it 9 times. KU ran the ball 51 times for 399 yards. Like, Kotelnicki would just stick with what was working, and JD was terrible against Illinois, but Grimes is a huge reason they lost that game. Devin Neal only had 14 carries. And he averaged 8 a pop. And yeah, so I know our backup running back, Daniel Highshaw, he didn't play on Saturday against UNLV, or Friday, I guess. So I am interested to see if he'll play or not. If not, it's going to be just Neal getting pretty much a lot of the workload. And like you said, West Virginia's been good against the run. So Jalon Daniels is going to have to be at least good on Saturday to win, I think. And he hasn't been anywhere close to that in the first 3 games. He's been bad.
If there's any team for him to play right now that could be a get-right game for him, it's West Virginia, to be honest, because of the struggles in the secondary. So, that's why we're concerned that this is the game he gets it right, because the struggles that he's been having against other teams, he won't have them against West Virginia because, the secondary just isn't as good as the ones he's faced other than Lindenwood so far. That's the concern.
Yeah, he only played 1 half against Lindenwood, and honestly, one of his picks, and it was another terrible pick. He threw it, just right to the guy. So, yeah, some of his picks have been just some of the worst picks I've ever seen. Just staring down receivers and the triple coverage. So, I'm pretty nervous about him going forward. I'm just nervous about, I don't know how the offense is just going to pick it up right away, like changing OCs maybe, but I'm nervous about them just going from really bad to really good in a week's span. And like I said, this game, the season might be on the line on Saturday.
Yeah. Real quick, everybody, scrolling along the bottom of the screen, if you're watching, you see the BetUS ticker. Kansas at West Virginia, Saturday, September 21st at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Central. Spread on the game is -2. West Virginia's favored. Over-under is 57.5. That has ticked up slightly from 56.5 a couple days ago. If you want to get in on that action and place a bet, if you're looking for a new sports book, look no further than BetUS. They have a special right now on your first deposit. If you use promo code YouTube150, you get a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,000. So go to BetUS, type in YouTube150 as a promo code, and take advantage of that deal today if you want to get in on the action on this game or any other game for that matter. And speaking of injuries, by the way, got to give a shout out to personal injury attorneys in West Virginia, Katz, Kenner, Stone Street, and Buckner. But speaking of injuries, you mentioned Highshaw. West Virginia is going to be, potentially anyway, be without one of their starting receivers, Preston Fox. He's also their punt returner and a very good punt returner. So I'm a little nervous about that. Not really his receiving. We're fairly deep there, but the punt return game, that's somewhere.
Can you hear the wind?
No, I cannot.
Okay, good. It's really windy, and I don't want to mess up the episode.
It's all good. I appreciate that. No, it's all good. But Preston Fox is going to be out. But he's questionable, basically. They said it'd be a game-time decision. We could have Rodney Gallagher, our sophomore receiver, back there catching punts. I'm a little nervous about that. That could be something that, if that goes awry in any way, that's an area that Kansas could take advantage of potentially. So that's really the only outside of Eddie Vesterinen, our D lineman, who's going to be out most of the season. I think that's the only 2 major injuries we may have. Is there anybody else besides Highshaw that you know of that may be out for the game?
Trying to think. I think we're pretty injury free. Highshaw, they said he was sick, is why he didn't play against UNLV. Like, he finished the game against Illinois. So I'm not sure. I could find out, I'm sure, but
it's all right.
It'd be a pretty big change if he's not able to play. Just, he's a nice little change of pace back. Our third string is Sevion Morrison from Nebraska. He's been here for a couple of years and hasn't done a ton. He's okay. He's no Highshaw. So it'll definitely be a difference, I think.
Yeah, you all have a similar situation as us with your 1-2 punch at running back. We have the quick Jaheim White. He's a quick shifty back, and then obviously CJ Donaldson, who's our power back. So you guys kind of have that same combination there, don't you?
Yeah, and I've been kind of just thinking about West Virginia's offense this week, and I feel like they have a nice set of playmakers. I know they picked up a couple wide receivers. Didn't
Yep.
they get they got Jaden Bray, right?
Correct. Jaden Bray, and we got
And
Justin
then
Robinson from Mississippi State.
who else is in the receiving corps or the receiver room that I would know? There's another one that I'm familiar with.
Hudson Clement was there last year, Preston Fox, and then Traylon Ray was a freshman last year that came on kind of late in the year, and then Rodney Gallagher. That's really the main ones that were there a
And
year
then
ago.
I was listening to a podcast earlier talking about this same game, and they kind of talked about how Garrett Greene hasn't been as willing as a runner, or they haven't
Correct.
ran him as much.
Yep.
How has he looked this year, just overall as a passer?
Yeah,
And
it's a great question, and I'm glad you touched on it because I wanted to flip to this side of the ball, but it's really odd because we heard all offseason how much better he had gotten when his mechanics, because his completion percentage a year ago was his big weakness, and he only completed about 53% of his passes, and he really struggled on the short and intermediate stuff. He was good down the field, but the short and intermediate passes he struggled on, and he worked on it all offseason. Well, he really hasn't looked that much better, and it's a little concerning. Also, but to be honest, I don't know how much help he's getting from his receivers. Our receivers at times struggle to get open and get separation. And that's one area I'm concerned about in this game as a West Virginia fan, because I know Kansas is really good in the secondary, especially, Kobe Bryant, and you have a corner on the other side who I know I never can.
Mello Dotson.
Mello Dotson. Both
And
of them
then,
are very good.
Our
Yep.
safeties have been really awesome. They got Marvin Grant from Purdue, and then OJ Burrows, who people that cover KU have been saying he had the best camp out of everyone, and that he wouldn't be a surprise if he was a first team all Big 12 guy. So yeah, the secondary's been good for sure.
Yeah. So that's one area. So I feel like one of the, in a show I do every week with a co-host of mine, one of the keys of the game for me was West Virginia is probably going to have to run the football with a loaded box at times in this game, because I'm not sure our receivers, I don't know that I have enough faith in our receivers to get open consistently against those Kansas DBs. Now, what I do think, Robinson and Bray, the two we mentioned earlier, they haven't gotten as many snaps as the guys who were on the team a year ago. But last week, they were the two that really made big plays near the end of the game. And they seem to be getting more and more snaps with each and every game. So it wouldn't surprise me if this is the week that we see those two guys get more snaps, especially if Preston Fox is out. And both of those guys are big receivers. So even if they can't get, completely open, their size may give them a little bit of an edge there, hopefully. So that's one area that might help. But that is definitely an area of concern for me, because I think Kansas is probably going to force West Virginia to run the ball, just because West Virginia may not be able to throw it.
Yeah, and that was my one worry, and that's why I kind of asked about Greene is last week, and I know he's been a running quarterback. I don't know how familiar you are with UNLV's quarterback, but
I watched part of that game, so I'm totally familiar.
Yeah, so they didn't run it very effectively, but he ran for 100 plus, which he's done a lot in his career, honestly. And then Illinois didn't really run it either. That's what I was talking about Neal earlier. Somehow Illinois' running back had more carries than him in that game, and he only averaged about 3 yards a carry. So my one worry has definitely been about Garrett Greene running it, because that's really how UNLV scored points, besides JD throwing picks. But I don't know if we've seen a front or a defensive front like West Virginia's yet. Like, I just think we were better up front than Illinois and UNLV, so we were kind of able to do whatever. But the one worry about the defense all year for me has been the front seven for KU, and they lost Craig Young, a linebacker who was pretty good for KU, transferred from Ohio State, and then Rich Miller. He wasn't the best player, but he was the leader. So he called all the plays defensively. He made all the calls. So I was worried about linebacker, but they got Cornell Wheeler. He transferred from Michigan. He's been really solid for KU, but I think we'll really know if the front seven is any good or not after this weekend. And I don't see why West Virginia wouldn't try to pound it on the ground with CJ and kind of run it with Garrett Greene. That's what I think. To me, I took it early in the week. I actually cashed out of it, but I took the under in this game because, like I said, I think the secondary. Um, I think obviously the secondary is the worry for West Virginia's defense, but
Mm-hmm.
KU cannot do anything through the air. They can't complete long
Yeah.
passes, anything. And then obviously, I think West Virginia, if they have any, if I think their game plan should just be to pound it,
Yep.
and whether that's just CJ or if CJ's kind of eating, you keep it with Garrett Greene. So, and you said West Virginia's receivers have struggled to separate, and that's where KU's strength is on the defense. So I
Mm-hmm.
personally think that West Virginia might slow the game down. They're going to run it. And then
Yep.
on offense, I don't think we're going to get those chunk plays through the air that maybe your guys' fans think. I think you see Jalon Daniels' name and you see KU's offense, you think total Nicky, but dude, I don't, those chunk plays and
Mm-hmm.
those, it's just not there through the air. So I honestly like the under a lot. Like I can see a 24-20 game, and
We're on the same page, man.
KU hasn't eclipsed 20 points against. We're not even going to count Lindenwood, but Illinois and UNLV, they haven't scored more than 20 points, and I would think West Virginia's defense is just as good as those defenses. Or at least I wouldn't think there's a huge separation there. So I don't see KU putting up 30-ish points, which I'm sure the team total is around 27 and a half for each, or 28,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
I really like the under in this game.
Yeah, I do too. My score prediction was 27-24 because I'm like you. I think West Virginia will take the air out of the ball as much as they can. Try to
Why
run the
wouldn't you?
football. Yeah. Try to run the ball. And I do think we'll see Garrett run it more. As fans, we're a little bit frustrated with that because we want to see him run more. We almost get the sense that they're trying to make Garrett into a pocket passer, but I think a lot of that too, in all fairness, could be, I think the defenses have been scheming that way. I think they're forcing him. They're putting spies on him and making him throw the football. They're not letting him get out. They're containing him with a spy. So I think the defenses may be part of that, but he's not been rolling out of the pocket and throwing on the run and stuff as much as he did a year ago. And he's, not been scrambling as much. They haven't even called as many design runs for him as they used to. Now, and when they have, it's worked to an extent. It didn't against Penn State, but that's, Penn State is Penn State. So I don't even know if I count that one, but yeah, we'd like to see him run it more if he can avoid taking some big hits. Cause he is, Garrett's not a big guy.
No,
he's only about
not.
200 pounds. So,
and I remember even talking, just doing a season preview for KU and just going through West Virginia and just kind of basically saying all Garrett Greene could do is run. And I honestly don't think that's true. And kind of thinking about it, you want to keep him upright. It's a guy that played in a bunch of close big games last year. So we talked about Josh Allen before this. Like that's a guy that runs all the time. And you want to keep him upright. And that's another thing with Jalon Daniels is the emphasis on this year was just keeping him healthy. He's had injury problems.
Right.
But to be honest, the last two games, Illinois and UNLV, like that dude has taken some licks, and they've ran a lot more design runs with him than I thought they would, and I really don't understand it. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I could see why West Virginia fans are a little flustered or frustrated with him not running, but it is a long season, and like I said, how much do these non-con games really matter? I know the Pitt game matters because that's a rivalry, but right now it's Big 12 play. It's kind of all or nothing, especially for both these teams this weekend. One of these teams is going to be 1-3, no matter what.
Yeah, and that's not a good place to be.
No.
Who is, we talked about the DBs at Kansas. Who are some names up front on the defensive front or even at the linebacker spot that West Virginia fans need to be looking for on Saturday?
I think Cornell Wheeler for sure. I talked about him, the Michigan transfer, number 44. Okay. He's been all over the place for this defense. And then they have a lot of defensive tackles that they rotate in and out, which I knew that was going to be the surprising group because there's like 8 guys up there that can play, and they just rotate. Tommy Dunn is one. He played really well against UNLV. They also have a defensive end, Jeremy Robinson, who's been around for a while. We have a kid named DJ Warner. He's the biggest recruit KU's ever signed. He had offers from Michigan State and Michigan and Ohio State. He
Mm-hmm.
actually was invited by both to that Michigan-Ohio State game last year. Ended up saying no, signing with KU. He's still coming along. He's a true freshman. There's like 8 defensive tackles that they rotate in and out, and I can't even think of all of their names
Yeah.
right now. But Tommy Dunn is one of them.
Yeah, that's the name that sounds familiar to me. I've heard a couple different podcasts mention his name.
Yeah, there's Caleb Taylor, Keenan Caldwell. There's a lot. They just rotate them in and out.
Okay.
So I'm hoping they're fresh and all good to go against CJ Donaldson. But yeah, that's a pretty tough test. And how has West Virginia been pretty good up front on both sides of the ball?
They have actually. The offensive line has been a good. We have left tackle Wyatt Milam, who may be playing his way into a first round pick. Our right tackle Wyatt hasn't allowed a sack in 2 years. 2 years and 3 games now at left tackle, and then the right tackle Nick Malone this past week was one of the top 10 graded offensive linemen in the country per PFF, so he's doing really well. So yeah, and we those guys. Lot of starts on that group. We did lose Zach Frazier, which you can't replace, to be fair. But the guys the guy who replaced him has started a lot of football games, and he's either a 5th or 6th year senior. So he's a veteran, and he knows what to do, and they've played a lot together, which is key up front. And then on the defensive front, TJ Jackson is a name that Kansas fans need to be on the lookout for. He started his very first game. He's a transfer from Troy. He's a senior. He's tied for the lead in the nation in tackles for loss with 7 in 3 games. So he's a name to keep your eye out for. Now, West Virginia was in a similar situation as Kansas a year ago. They were rotating 10, 11 guys in and out on the defensive front. Now they only have about 6 that they're playing consistently. I mentioned earlier a player named Edward Vesterinen, who's out for most of the year. He was a defensive tackle, or is a defensive tackle. He's out, but TJ's taking his place, and TJ has been the most explosive player on the defensive side of the ball pretty much so far this year. So I'm not sure from a production standpoint, I'm not sure we've lost anything there. Eddie's leadership was important though, because he's a veteran guy. But and then at the linebacker spot, I don't really talk about them earlier. Josiah Trotter's a redshirt freshman. He's really good. Jeremiah Trotter's son, actually. And then,
nice.
Yep. And then Trey Lathan has played really well, too, at the other linebacker spot. So those are a couple linebackers.
Man, the more we talk about this matchup makes me like the under even more. I mean, I know crazy things can happen, block punts, muffed punts, but I guess West Virginia's weakness on defense is KU's weakness on offense.
Yep.
And then our strength on offense is
our strength on defense.
Yeah. So, and I would think KU goes into the game knowing that West Virginia is going to try to pound it. Obviously, game script can be dependent there, where I guess if West Virginia gets up by, it's just a different score, then maybe West Virginia starts having to air it out. But I've said it probably 3 times, but Jalon, his only completions are honestly little dump downs. And I feel like West Virginia's been suspect to giving up big plays through the air. And I don't really see a field stretcher for this KU team right now. So I think if they're going to move the ball through the air, it's probably going to be little short intermediate routes.
Which plays into West Virginia's strengths, actually, because that's what they took away from Pitt last week. But unfortunately, they gave away the deep ball. So,
yeah, and like I said, obviously crazy things can happen. That's why some people don't like betting totals, period. But I just don't see either team even getting to 30. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
We're on the same page, but I think we're two of the only ones I've heard say that. Most of the people I've heard talk about this game are saying to take the over because of the other team struggles. They think West Virginia will be able to move the ball, I guess, on Kansas. I don't know, but whatever, or that Kansas will be able to put up a lot of points on West Virginia, and it may be somewhat of a shootout. But I just don't see that personally.
Yeah, I don't know how familiar you are with UNLV. I know you watch a ton of college football. Ricky White, the receiver for UNLV, right?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I watched a little bit of that game
I
last
mean,
week. So yeah.
dude, this is a guy that had, I think, 1,400 yards last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like he in the bowl game against KU, I was just blown away with how good he was. He had, I mean, if I tell you before the KU UNLV game that Ricky White is going to have one catch for 5 yards, what would you say the final score of the game is going to
Oh
be?
yeah. Kansas wins the game. No doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so yeah, the secondary held that kid to one catch, 5 yards. And I mean, I think he's one of the best receivers in the
Yeah.
country.
The key for West Virginia to win a game, in my opinion, and I heard this on another, I can't take credit for this because I heard it on another show somewhere. I've listened to so many, I never can keep track. But to keep the ball away from those corners, give it to the tight end, to the backs out in the flat, maybe throw screens to your receivers.
Yeah.
Those types of plays, because you do not want to try to go one-on-one. If you try to put West Virginia's receivers against the Kansas corners, in my opinion, I think Kansas wins that battle 9 out of 10 times. So you've got to scheme up ways to get the ball in the middle of the field, which I think West Virginia can do because, we have a really good tight end in Cole Taylor who, we haven't even talked about the tight end position. Cole
That's
Taylor,
why
Cole Taylor could have a big game this week.
if you start pounding it with CJ and then you start running RPOs with Garrett Greene where he starts running it and they start killing them with those two, that just opens up even more over the middle of the field. And like you said, dumping it in the flats. In the middle of the field last week, I mean, it was just their quarterback running it straight up the gut. And he had so many chunk plays where, I mean, if you go look at his runs from last week, all of them, KU had him tackled in the backfield, wrapped up. And I think that's what Garrett Greene, or at least I've seen him do well. He's a tough motherfucker.
Well,
to me.
Jalon can do the same thing.
Yeah, so I think if they do get that ground game going, it's going to open a lot over the middle of the field. So I guess I understand what people are saying. And KU, they probably haven't played an offense this dynamic. I know UNLV has a really, really good play caller and Brennan Marion or whatever his name is, the go-go offense. They couldn't do much, but I still think they're going to have some growing pains with that quarterback throwing it. So I think this will be the best offense they see so far. So I guess it does make sense. I feel like I'd have the total more around the low 50s, like a 52 or a 54.
Yeah, I'm at 50. I guess I'm at 51. 27, 24 is where I'm at. So,
and then you mentioned the spread too, which is weird to me because I feel like wouldn't Vegas just put it at a field goal and see what people do?
They know you'd think so. Normally you know more about betting than I do, but probably so. But I'm no expert. But you normally get 3 points just for being at home, typically, right? If it's an even game, they'll give the home. So that tells me that they may actually think Kansas is a slightly better team than West Virginia, but West Virginia has a home field advantage. So they're giving them. So Kansas is basically a point better than West Virginia on a neutral field. But West Virginia's, because they're at home, they're giving them that's at least how I interpret it. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, and I wonder how much it has to do with the coaching matchup. Like maybe they think Lance is head and shoulders better than Neal Brown, which our coaching has been a huge issue the first 3 games.
But I don't think it's been Lance. It's been and that's another thing. You guys have an offensive coordinator who's kind of being scrutinized, on our defensive coordinator is being scrutinized. So it's a very interesting game all the way around, really.
Yeah, and I'm just hearing. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much you buy that. I said earlier, and your face, you kind of made an interesting face, which is kind of what I did too. But we lost to UNLV. I drove home fucking as pissed as could be. Like you said, we're fans. These games affect me. I don't know why. These kids are teenagers, but drove home and we did a live episode and I just went on a crazy rant. And one of our guys that listens to the episode, he's insanely plugged in with KU football. Like former players, current players, he knows things before it even comes out public. But he texted me during, and he was so pissed. He's like, dude, just go ahead and tell people on the live. But he said Jeff Grimes is telling Jalon Daniels the reads before the play. And I don't know how much I believe it, And I don't even know how much that's a thing. Like, I'm not really a football nerd or anything.
Yeah, I'm not either.
So I don't know if that's even a legit thing, but they said him and Jalon Daniels just are not on the same page, and he's basically telling him the reads. And obviously, I'm sure JD can check out of it, but maybe they're kind of butting heads with that.
Yeah.
But then when you look at the interceptions with JD, like Illinois, that pick six I told you about, it was 3rd and 20. They ran a bubble screen. The play before, they ran a bubble screen to the opposite side with their 275-pound tight end on 2nd and 30 or whatever. So all the picks are telegraphed, and he did it against UNLV. He just stared at the guy. The guy picked it, took it to the opposite 20. They come out of halftime, first drive. He says hi. If you go look at that pick, he does not take his eye off that receiver the entire play. So I don't know if there's a legitimacy to that where he's just telling him to read and he's getting pissed at Jalon if he's not going to that read. But also it's his first year as the OC. Jalon Daniels has been around since 2019.
Yeah.
So I don't
hate it for Jalon because it could be hurting his draft stock if he plans to go pro.
Oh yeah, he did for sure. And then that's another thing is like if he is doing that, I couldn't see Lance Leipold just letting that slide.
I don't
Lance
think he
Leipold's won everywhere. Like
yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it. And, you know, he made I was listening to Lance's press conference, and he made an interesting comment when they asked him a question about that situation, not that specifically, but just about the offensive coordinator being new. And he said, what nobody's talking about is we also have a new offensive line coach. And I'm thinking, you know, that could, you know, so, and it made me think, I'll ask you, we haven't talked about Kansas's offensive line. I guess you kind of touched on it early on, but is the offensive line playing okay?
Yeah, and it's tough for me to pay attention because I more so just watch the ball, see where the ball get. I don't sit there and watch the trenches. But everything I've listened to and read says our offensive line is graded out well. Their tackles, Bryce Cable was their starting right tackle last year. I talked about Dominic Cooney. He's actually starting at right guard for the San Francisco 49ers. He was our left tackle last year. So they brought Cable from right tackle over to left tackle, and then they got Logan Brown playing right tackle when a lot of people thought he was going to start at left tackle. And he was actually a top 50 recruit, I believe a 5-star coming out of high school. Went to Wisconsin, and then we got him from there. And so, yeah, everything I haven't heard anything bad about the offensive line, and I think it proves true how effective we've been on the ground. And maybe that just says more about Devin Neal, which he's just ridiculous. But JD hasn't had a ton of pressure on him. And then we've ran, like I said, super effectively.
Yeah.
Devin Neal had 14 carries against Illinois for over 100 yards. And then against UNLV, I'm not sure the exact stat line, but I know he ran for 120 or 130.
Yep.
So they'll see a beefier front this Saturday, but yeah, there's been no complaints about the offensive line.
I didn't think so. I mean, I was looking at some stats last night, and I mean, the running numbers are there, and he had, you know, Jalon hasn't taken a lot of sacks, like you said. Do you think rust could be an issue with Jalon, like trying to get rust where he was hurt last year?
Absolutely. I think that could be the biggest issue. I mean, the OC change could be wild, or it could be one of the reasons. And another thing is like every quarterback that played for Kotelnicki ended up figuring it out or looking okay. So it could be that. But yeah, I mean, this is a guy that hasn't played. I'm trying to think. Well, he did play 3 games last year. His last game he played against Nevada, Illinois, and then BYU. So yes, BYU was the last game he played. I think that was the 4th game of the year because they went to Texas the next week. It was a really hyped up game in Austin. KU was undefeated. They wanted to see Jalon Daniels versus Quinn Ewers. Jalon Daniels woke up that morning on his back wrong or whatever, got to the field, felt this crazy sharp pain in his back. They said he was in the locker room like screaming in pain. And so he hadn't played a game since BYU. His first game was Lindenwood. Like he didn't end up playing in the bowl game. So yeah, I think Russ for sure. I don't know how much work he put in this offseason. But the same thing happened 2 years ago is why I'm so confused. His last game was the 5th game of the year against TCU in Lawrence College game day. And he messed his shoulder up. And then he ends up coming back in the bowl game against Arkansas. And he set a bowl game record for most passing yards. It was, I forget exactly what. It was either that bowl or he threw for like 500 yards and 6 touchdowns after he had missed 7 games or whatever it was. So I can't get a grip on it. I feel if he doesn't, I mean, he actually, our game day reporters were wondering if KU was going to pull him, which we have our color guy is a guy that's done KU football for like 40 years. He's all Lawrence, like just obsessed with Lawrence KU football. And then our sideline reporter, he played on the Orange Bowl team and he went to Lawrence High School, like from Lawrence. And both of those dudes were questioning if KU should pull Jalon Daniels during that UNLV game. That's how bad it's gotten.
Yeah.
And our backup is he was a preferred walk-on. So he got a scholarship now, but he ended up playing last year. And we almost beat Texas Tech and Kansas State with him starting. And that's Kotelnicki calling the plays. So I don't know. It just has my brain in a pretzel.
Yeah, I hear you, man. This game will do that to you, will it not?
I know. And
Crazy.
So, yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's got to be because he does look rusty, because a lot of people are saying his arm looks dead. And I just don't agree with that. There's been a lot of deep shots he's taken where he's overthrown guys by 10 yards multiple times. If you go watch the Illinois game, if you go watch the Lindenwood game, he's overthrowing guys. So I don't know if his arm is dead. And then people are saying confidence too. Like he's throwing absolute BBs into quadruple coverage. That doesn't make me feel like he's not confident. Like he's just taking shots. So I don't know. I really don't know what it is. There's a lot of times where he needs to put touch on a ball and he'll throw a laser. The first
Garrett Greene did that all year last year. That's why his completion percentage was 53%.
The first drive of the game against Illinois, he had Luke Grimm who beat a corner, or he was in the slot linebacker. It might've been a linebacker. He had him beat by a couple of yards. If he just puts touch on it, it's a completion, or maybe it hits his hands, but he throws it on a line. The linebacker picks it off. So when he needs to put, or if he needs to throw it on a line, he lobs it. So yeah, he's not making good decisions, and he's not putting the right touch on certain balls.
Yeah, that's crazy. One more quick thing that I want to talk about, because I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. But one of the things West Virginia has also struggled with, that where Kansas could potentially benefit from it, is West Virginia has also struggled when they have gotten pressure on quarterbacks. Those quarterbacks scrambling for big yards. They're struggling to contain the pocket, and they're not. Sometimes they don't have a spy on the guy. Everybody's dropping back in. You have four guys rushing. Everybody else is back in coverage. So when the quarterback gets past that first, they're going through the B gap, or at times around the outside and just running for big yardage. So that's an area, though, where Kansas could exploit potentially if West Virginia doesn't get that fixed.
Yeah, no. And then one more thing on Jalon is I feel like everyone thinks he's this like dynamic runner, and he's like this really fast, speedy runner, but he really isn't. So I don't know. Some people see that, or they think Jalon's this really good runner, and he's okay speed. Like he can beat guys, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that kills you, or he's really looking to run. He can make the weird thing about him.
But he can run good enough. He can run good enough to get you 10 or 15 yards on a broken play.
The weird thing is all of his good throws this year have been on the run, like going to his left, going to his right. If he's standing in the pocket, it's been terrible. So yeah, we'll see.
Did Kotelnicki ask him to stand in the pocket a lot, or did he have him rolling out more?
He had him rolling out quite a bit, running RPOs and stuff like that.
Maybe he's not. Maybe that's where. Maybe it's the same. Like I said with Garrett Greene earlier, maybe they need to roll him out more and quit trying to make him a pocket quarterback. I don't know.
Yeah, something has to change, or maybe they can simplify it for him. Maybe this week they've coming up with little short intermediate stuff.
Mhm.
Because honestly, I don't know if the receivers are getting open. And like I said, his touch on deep balls has been,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it's been miserable, to be honest.
if it makes you feel any better, our receivers have 0 interceptions, and West Virginia has forced 0 turnovers in 3 games. Now, we have 1 turnover, but it was Penn State had a bad snap in that game. That's the only turnover we have. So, if there's a game for him to get right, it may be this one.
Yeah, I didn't know that at all.
Yep. 0 turnovers, man.
So yeah,
Zero turnovers, and we're giving up about 300 a game in the air.
yeah, if that's the thing though, KU, I'm gonna stay calm, but if they can't, I get maybe if they squeak by West Virginia, I can be okay. But if they squeak by and are not effective through the air, like it's no disrespect to West Virginia, but if they can't get West Virginia through the air,
Right.
who else are they going to get through the air?
That's exactly the way, and that's the way we're kind of going to feel probably with Jalon as much as he's been struggling. But the thing is, we've seen Jalon play well, so we don't necessarily expect him to struggle. You know what I'm saying? We're expecting the Jalon Daniels of old to come in here on Saturday. You know, that's kind of how we're looking at this. But
Yeah,
but we're also so daggone negative right now that we expect every quarterback to be, to look like John Elway. So, it is what it is. But anyway, listen, man, this has been fun. I really enjoy you coming on. Let
I,
everybody,
I
let everybody know where they can find you one more time.
yeah. So my @ on Twitter is bturner23 or on X, I guess. And then the podcast is Ain't No Seats Pod. I said it to start. I really enjoyed doing this a couple of years ago. And I was thrilled when you asked me on again. And I've really been wanting to learn more about West Virginia because this game to me makes or breaks the season for KU. I think you could really just throw in the towel if you lose, or even if you win, even if the final's 2-0, you're 1-0 in Big 12 play. And to be honest, I think this is one of the toughest games on the schedule. Like you guys might disagree with that, but it's got to be, I mean, one of our toughest road games, and then it's a Big 12 opener. So you want to start well.
Mm-hmm.
Our other road games, yeah, Arizona State looks better than we thought. At BYU, they look better than we thought. Then you got at Kansas State. So I just think the road games are the toughest when I look at the schedule. And West Virginia going to Morgantown is always a weird travel.
Yeah, it's a long trip for sure. Well, Braiden, well, thanks again, man. Again, everybody, if you're listening on audio platform, please give us a 5-star rating. We much appreciate it. If you're on YouTube, make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. Make sure you go check out Braiden's show, Ain't No Seats Pod, where they cover KU football, and I'm assuming basketball as well during basketball season.
Oh, yeah.
Got to give a shout out again to my sponsors, BetUS Online Sportsbook and Casino, Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, attorneys at law. If you need a personal injury or medical malpractice attorney in West Virginia or Virginia, go to yourlawyeryourvoice.com and they will take care of you. With that being said, thanks again, Braiden. Thanks to everybody for watching and listening. Have a top shelf rest of your day, and Q Country Roads.